Hey man, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, man? How you doing? Can you see me okay?
Yes, and I've already hit live, so I can see you fine. All looks good.
Okay, amazing.
Awesome. So, hey everyone, welcome to this new episode of LinkedIn for Leaders. I'm your host, 𝘁𝗵𝗀𝗃. Just quick sound check. Vikram, you can hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly.
Likewise, you're coming through nice and strong there. So, like I said, this is a show that I used to do weekly, but realized that after a point, it's better to focus on quality than quantity. So we're doing these a couple of times a month and leveling up the level of conversation, as you can see over here. I'm very excited to have this conversation with someone I've known for a very long time, Vikram Ahuja. Welcome to the show, Vikram.
Thanks, Karan. Good to be here.
Likewise. Fantastic. Great to have you. And with that, I'm going to jump into a quick introduction of Vikram. Just a quick caveat at the outset. I did get a lot of interaction with various leaders in the GCC space. Just for clarity, this is going to be a balanced conversation around building a founder brand, Vikram's own journey over time, and some questions for sure around GCC. But tying those into building leadership narratives, right? So with that, an intro to Vikram. Vikram is a multi-domain serial entrepreneur blending art, technology, and business to build ventures shaping the future of work, travel, and creative communities. The co-founder of ANSR, which is a Fortune 500 GCC leader, and CEO of Talent500, which has over 1.5 million global professionals in its network. He is presently leading and investing in companies that redefine how global teams form, how people explore the world, and how creativity scales through immersive tech. Formerly, he was the founder at Byond Travel, Ex-Kyron Global Accelerator, and also built ParallelXR. He's also an actor, a writer, director with award-winning films, and formerly a global Latin dance competitor. So that's quite the
That's a
introduction.
really long, yeah. Thank you for that.
Of course, bro. But quite a storied journey you've had over time. And with that, we would otherwise, jump into questions about a few different things. But like I said, I've actually, got a few really interesting ones from people that you know well. So I'm going to start with the first one with someone that you've known for a very long time, who is 𝘁𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃, who's the managing director at ANSR. She asks, Vikram, what are two truths and a lie about Vikram the founder?
Oh, about me as a founder. Okay. Okay, so two truths and a lie. I have spent a lot of time building a dating company. I have built a company that collected virtual reality experiences around the world. And then third, not really a founder experience, but also more recently, I was in the news in the tabloids for my alleged affair with a Bollywood star. And that kind of plays into my story as a founder, but yeah.
Okay. So, ladies and gents in the audience, you have to now give us your, in the comments, tell us which of these three are two truths and a lie. So, he spent a lot of time building a dating company. He spent a lot of time collecting virtual reality experiences from around the world. And he allegedly had an affair with a Bollywood actor, which was quite in the news recently. If you're following that, I definitely saw that story. So let us know in the comments which is the truth, with two truths and a lie there. What is a lesser known discipline or hack that has driven disproportionate value for you?
Yeah. It's a good question. And I was thinking about how that's changed over time. When I used to be really young, I used to be a kid, I had this paranoia about forgetting things. And so what I would do is take Post-its and then stick them around my house. And that way I would remember things. But then the problem was after a while, I couldn't read what I'd written on the Post-its. So it became a question of actually not just remembering what I'd written, but also remembering what was written on the Post-it.
Deciphering it, yeah.
More recently, we did a whiteboarding exercise with the team, and then we had, like a whiteboard with some points, and people were putting out post-its with their ideas. And typically in these situations, after it's done, someone's job it is to take the post-its down, transcribe the notes, actually sort of say, okay, who said what, etc. So what I did is I took a photo of it. I uploaded it on, I used Claude. So I uploaded it on Claude and I had it transcribe what was written and plus put out a framework. And so now that is my go-to hack, which is I love to whiteboard. But rather than just leave a whiteboard as is, I combine that with, photo AI, transcribe, and then sort of, whatever we've sort of brainstormed on a whiteboard, make it into a very fleshed out framework, all within a space of 30 minutes. So you go from ideas to actual blueprint execution, whatever it is, framework in 30 minutes, which I find is actually hugely beneficial versus just doing one or the other.
Awesome. And how long have you been doing this?
I've been doing it. I've been doing it for quite a while now. So I'm always trying to find new ways to use the AI tools that I have. So this has been more recent, but also for people who know me, I love to whiteboard. So
yeah,
so that's for me is just a natural go-to. So this kind of works well for me.
Fantastic. Actually, on that, I saw recently that you can use Nano Banana, and you take the photograph of whatever your notes are, and you have in conferences they'll have a sketch artist who will draw out the entire sort of visual narrative like a visual infographic.
Yeah.
So you can get that also very quickly.
These tools are crazy. The infographic is cool. There's also Google has a tool called Notebook LLM, where if you upload a document, it creates a podcast conversation between two people discussing the topic that and it's phenomenal. It is an insane way to learn any concept is that you actually just translate it into a podcast. So it's very cool.
Listening to it.
Yeah.
Very cool. So next question. And like I said, ladies and gents, wherever you're tuning in from, our intent is very much to keep this interactive. So any questions and comments that you have, please share them in the chat. As an award-winning filmmaker, to you, what are the parallels between a great narrative on screen and building a compelling founder or leadership brand?
Yeah, so this is something that I was that I've always found very interesting, is that how do you take the idea of storytelling and put it into a business context, but more interestingly, how do you sort of put it into your context? And one of the things that I find very interesting is this concept of origin stories, right? And a lot of films will have an origin story in the arc where it talks about the background of the protagonist, why do they behave a certain way, or what drives them, and so on. But very little is known about the origin stories of us as founders or of us as professionals. And sometimes it goes a long way to actually explain how you think. So the notion of an origin story is interesting, but also it's about, like on screen, you have this notion of a flawed character, right? No character is genuinely perfect. And so what I found is, I think authenticity comes from being able to share every part of that journey that you've been through, not just sharing the highlight reel, which unfortunately today, if you go on Instagram or even on LinkedIn, you just find everyone is talking about their life like it is a highlight reel. And the reality is that, it's not, right? We're all going through our ups and downs. And I think the ability to sort of share that journey in its entirety is really where authenticity comes from. And for me, that parallel of really understanding that, you're telling a story, you are the character in that story, and you're not always going to be perfect. I think this creates a lot more of, authenticity, and for people to be able to resonate and actually just identify with what you're talking about.
Amazing. I remember, you do it very occasionally, I think on LinkedIn, but on a different platform, you use video really well too. And I remember, especially during the pandemic, everyone's having this challenging moment, right? And I remember seeing a few different videos that you'd posted, which is just using humor in everyday situations so well, and you feel included in that conversation, right? So.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'm glad there's an audience of one at least, but I definitely need to get back into that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that there are many, many more who followed many of those. So, given that you've obviously, been making films for a very long time, and just now tacking back onto, this platform, which is LinkedIn.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, they launched video about a year and a half ago, and then they had good, decent amount of traction initially, and then it sort of nosedived for a good 6 months plus, and now they're doubling down on that in a big way. So, any quick tips that you have? Anyone thinking of leveraging video? Some things that they can keep in mind.
Yeah, a couple of them. I think one of the things that I'm noticing with a lot of people who are just crushing it with great videos is that it's not fancily produced. It just looks real. It looks authentic. It's a conversation versus a hyper produced video. The second thing I think is just the hook. Your first 3 seconds is really where in that scroll you can get someone to either pause and watch or continue scrolling. And I think that first, not even 3 seconds, maybe it's that first second is so critical, especially if you can just start mid-action or go straight into it, right? The third thing that I also noticed, which I do, is I will sometimes watch video without the audio, right? And so just having subtitles or captions that is done in a manner where it's not sort of misinterpreting what you're saying. A lot of the subtitling software sometimes kind of pulls it off wrong. Today, I think all video editing tools will give you that. LinkedIn itself has captions on it, although the only challenge is sometimes it's not accurate. And then I think, I think it's just about, yeah, I mean, again, going back to what I was saying, just being authentic about, what you're talking about. I want to sort of know what you think. And if you're an interesting person, then I want to know that more and more, right? So I think that's really where an audience gets built.
Actually, on that, I find in my conversations with different leaders that I work with, one of the things that sort of holds them back sometimes is it's easy to get stuck in this loop of oh, how will it come across, and then therefore how should I even be taking this action? How do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that idea of like it has to be perfect or it doesn't happen. Like I really just think that it's a bit overanalyzed. Frankly, people are consuming so much content today that your content is a blip in their attention stream,
Yeah.
and they've watched it, they've moved on, and by the time that you've spent thinking about whether you do something is pointless, right? So I'm starting to get better at it. I think the only thing that holds me back is if I actually have the time to structure my idea in a manner that it actually makes sense, versus just kind of being, a rant on something. There's a guy I saw recently. He does these great videos where he's, it's sort of close up to the camera,
Mm-hmm.
talking about different concepts in 60 seconds. He does it on Instagram, but I also
Okay.
see him doing it on LinkedIn recently. So and he talks about really random things. Like he'll say, okay, working out in 60 seconds, let's go. Or like, here's meditation in 60 seconds, let's go. And he's just sort of taken very catchy phrases. But the idea that it's 60 seconds means that you're not really committing. You know that it's 60 seconds and that's it, it's done, right?
It's
So
done.
it's
Yeah.
go hit a peak and then end. And so I find that I end up watching almost all his videos entirely because I know it's 60 seconds, right? Versus, having a 5 minute long video that may or may not start or go anywhere. So I think even things like that, it's just sort of simple, sometimes simpler said than done. But I think, like they say, good is the enemy of best, I think, right?
Mm.
So in that thought process of trying to do best, even the good doesn't get done, right? So I would just sort of, yeah, encourage people to not overthink it. At least that's been my learning.
So if I would press you on that a little bit more, how, and I know that you've done a fair bit of, theater, acting, etc. in the past, and maybe that informs, how you sort of show up on video and, the comfort that you have in different places. But how does someone also sort of look to articulate an idea very, very simply in a short amount of time?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think there are three ways to think about it. One is this an idea that you have a clear point of view on? Two is, are you talking about something that is very specific or topical so that it becomes interesting for people to want to listen to? And then three, are you naturally someone who likes to, speak out or are you somebody who likes to write? Now, if you're somebody who likes to write, then the video medium may not be as comfortable for you. But if you're someone who obviously likes to speak, then it's an easy one-to-one. But if you're somebody who likes to write as well, there are ways to, hack it today. Like the easiest thing to do is write it out, put it into your AI tool of choice, and ask it to create a nice, catchy script for you. You have tools today on like on the iPhone, for example, that have a teleprompter on the screen. So, you don't have to look away. You can actually be looking at your phone, looking at the camera, and reading it word for word.
Word for word, yeah.
You can pace it. You can play around with how you want to sort of, and that's it. It couldn't be more easier, right? So it's as easy as type it out, read it on screen, and you just have to have a camera on through the process, really.
Fantastic. A lot of very practical ideas in there. You've been very active on LinkedIn for a while now, and so much so that, you're putting out posts multiple times a week. So before we talk about, your approach to actually creating the content, you've talked about a few different hacks already. How do you, like, I'm a big fan of having clarity on what is the arc, just like you were saying about the story, right? So what is the arc that you want to create over a period of time, and then therefore work backwards from that. In your case, given that you've been active on this platform and other places as well for a while now, how do you evaluate the ROI, essentially, both at a personal level as also objectively as co-founder ANSR, CEO Talent500? How do you evaluate it?
Yeah, I think this is going to be different for different people depending on their line of work and what they're using LinkedIn for. But I think there are basically three dimensions here. One is, does it impact, or does it benefit you individually? Does it benefit your business? And does it just give you access to an audience that might either have a similar point of view, or that might be interesting for you to engage with on a much broader spectrum? So personally, if you look at it, I think one of the things that I really believe in is that as an entrepreneur or as a founder or a business leader, you are, in many ways, the brand that your company also lives on. And so you do need to invest in building that brand in whichever way it is. LinkedIn today allows you a great platform to do that. So therefore, personally building brand, talking about either the domain that you work in, or talking about something that's completely outside, but at least having a presence allows your voice to be heard, which I think is very important, especially if you're a founder or an entrepreneur. From a business standpoint, it's very simple. Does your conversation about a particular topic get you any sort of lead from a business standpoint? And then what do you actually do with that lead? And then the third part of it is, are you able to sort of reach an audience that you want to engage with and you typically wouldn't have the opportunity to do so? I do feel that the more you put in, the more you get. And, I think consistency is obviously key. So being able to do the same thing over and over again is going to get you over the line. And I think it's very easy to do it a couple of times and say, well, I didn't really get anything out of it. Not much engagement. I only have, 27 likes, whatever that might be. But I think there is a lot of reward to consistency, and also just the fact that, frankly, 90% or more are people just consuming. There are very few creators on LinkedIn. So this is now the moment that you should be creating, because I feel like, it's that sort of, it's only going to go bigger from here.
Yeah, 100%. Like 18 months ago, the number was between 1% and 3%. LinkedIn has new, they'll say anywhere between 850 to like a billion, accounts or users.
Right.
And
Right.
18 months ago, it was like 1 to 3%. Now it's between 8.5 to 10%. And so it's just like a year and a half, right? And at the same time, then you find that people are saying there's maybe also going to be a window for this before it just gets proliferate. There's just this, you already have enough and more AI content, AI commenting, etc. How is it that you stand out uniquely enough? I just want to ask a little bit more, Vikram, because there are more than a few, let's say, companies who do between 2 to 5 to about 8 million ARR founders, Techstars founders who use this. They get naturally They've been, again, much like yourself, they've been doing it for the last, say, 2-3 years, and they're getting between 30 to 60% of their inbound directly from the CEO, posting content, thought leadership content. So have you seen like some tangible numbers, or, in terms of people or customers or conversations citing, oh, I saw Vikram posting this, or I saw this piece of content? Anything you can share about that?
Yes, all the time. It's surprising how I would have posted someone, and in a random sort of customer conversation, they'll reference something that I posted. Even sometimes if I'm meeting someone for the first time, and let's say they might be following, our page, and we might have reshared something I posted, people will reference it, and I truly, it surprises me sometimes. But at the same time, I think it's very natural today in a business context that you research, right? So if I'm buying something from you, I'm going to see who you are, and one of those places that I'm going to research you is on LinkedIn. Of course, on LinkedIn, you can also see who's looking at your profile. But, part of that research is really seeing, what are you talking about? So I do find that that happens quite often. And frankly, I think it works well, right? So we use that to our advantage, actually.
Fantastic. And to your point, in the research side, right? Again, one of the fastest growing demographics on LinkedIn is the Gen Z, sort of, and younger age group, and their decision making, 70% of it happens just through deep research. Before they even have decided, they've already decided that they're going to work with you before they make the first call.
Absolutely.
So a lot of and actually connected to something that you just said, we have another question from Ms. Devesh Singla, who is the recent SVP and MD at Signant Health. He asked for GCC leaders who've traditionally operated behind the scenes. What's Vikram's advice on transitioning from operational excellence to thought leadership without losing authenticity?
Yeah, in many ways, today, GCCs as an industry, for example, there is so much interest in terms of what's happening in the industry. Obviously, as an industry, it's really sort of now, we're at that moment of inflection where the industry is about to explode. There's a lot of interest. People are talking about it every single day, etc. So I think for a lot of people who are actually deep in the trenches and building, their perspective is very unique, but because they're actually sharing practitioners, perspectives and experience, right? Unlike, let's say, the media or analysts that are sharing an outside-in academic perspective. So I feel like there is just a lot of value in talking about, real-world stories from the war room, right? What are you seeing? What are you doing? What are your learnings? And quite frankly, I think the industry has grown through this, peer learning and sharing, where people have really built on top of the best practices that they have heard from other GCCs. In fact, one of the things that we do before we set up a GCC is we actually, will take our customers on a road trip or a road show around the city, where we're getting them to meet other GCCs, professionals, leaders, people who are in the trenches, and they talk about what they're seeing and doing. So it's already happening. So I think there's an audience for it. And I think that transition obviously has to be mindful of what you can and cannot talk about. I know a lot of companies have, policies on their employees talking about, let's say, stuff happening at work online, but nothing stops you as a professional from sharing your own personal experiences of what you are seeing, or how it's impacting, let's say, your domain or your space, or what you might be building, obviously what you can share, or what your journey has been. I think some of the most engaging content that we put out on either ANSR or Talent500, which is our talent network today, is just about people talking about, what they're doing, right? And that's I think there's a lot of value in that.
And because you said these are a lot of them are practicing practitioners, right? Experts in the domain. One, let's say, from the startup space, is that, okay, usually hardcore engineering tech SaaS founders, they might not be the best at, say, communicating, or sort of just articulating their sort of core thought. Would you even say there's merit in them leaning into, much like they will upskill, there's enough and more certifications around AI and everything else, so just spending the time in learning some of these tools around video, around presenting themselves better, or are you seeing that they naturally already have it? It's just about framing it and putting it out a certain way?
No, I think it's a wide spectrum. I think there are people who are just naturally good in front of the camera and are comfortable speaking their mind, and then there are people who just get very nervous looking at themselves, right? And so I definitely see the value in someone being able to speak their mind out on a public platform like this. And like I was saying today, there are multiple tools that can help you do that. So I think there's ways that you can definitely coach and skill and really sort of figure out what works for you. And yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, it's just a matter of giving it a shot and seeing, if it actually makes sense. And a lot of people, I think, won't even try. Like, the assumption is, no, I wouldn't like it, or I'm not comfortable with it. But I've seen a lot of people who are at first very awkward and unsure, and then over time they start developing their own style, right? And
Yeah.
that itself is the uniqueness that people want to see, right? Nobody wants to see a perfectly framed sort of somebody who's delivering a monologue with a lot of actions and is very dramatic and so on, right? Like, I think the authenticity is really what I think is missing. Yeah.
Yeah, like you said at the outset, even if you want to put yourself out in video, don't worry about having this perfect looking background and perfect lighting and everything else, right?
Yeah,
Have a-
absolutely.
just take a selfie video and have a conversation, and likelihood of people really engaging with that will probably be really high.
Yes.
Um, and one of the other things that you talked about, articulating ideas, but actually, before that, we have another audience question from Mr. Divik Saxena, who is the VP at Fidelity Investments. He said, with the proliferation of AI, how does, and I'm transitioning into some of these GCC specific questions, also tying into a post that you shared just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
He asks, with the proliferation of AI, how does ANSR plan to leverage AI or agentic AI for GCC setup? And
Yeah.
you talked about something called a GCC in a box. Maybe that's
Yeah. That's something that we're working on. Look, I think the idea of setting up a global center or just working in a different country is an extremely complex endeavor, right? And it involves multiple moving parts. There's a lot of unknowns, and there's an unknown of unknowns. You don't even sometimes know what you don't know, right? And when you discover it, it's too late. So often companies struggle with putting in place a lot of mechanisms that allows them to invest early on research, legal, accounting, etc. And we've seen that the time spent on that, as well as the effort, sometimes can get very overwhelming, especially for smaller companies. So our belief really with AI is that, and this is how we're using it, is that we believe that there is tremendous value in being able to access the right amount of information at the right time. With this concept of GCC in a box, the product's called One Hub. We're building it on top of ServiceNow. So what we're doing is building out, workflows across different activities that need to happen. We're providing, there's an information repository and an ability to access that information repository in an intelligent conversational manner. So you're not necessarily having to, click and search, but you're almost being able to converse to get the information that you want. And then it also is very prescriptive in terms of guiding you on what that playbook should look like for you to set up, operate, and scale your GCC. What we're really trying to do is remove the uncertainty and the opaqueness of setting up a center, and making it very transparent in terms of, here's what happens first, here's what happens next, here's what happens third, here's everything that you need to know and everything that you need to have ready to be able to get there, and here's how much time it'll take. And quite frankly, I also feel that it frees up time that we spend today on back and forth emails and Zoom calls explaining people what happens first and next and so on, to actually do better things. So we're actually finding more time to engage customers on more sort of consultative conversations versus transactional conversations, right? So it also allow, I think over time it will also allow us to scale in a much more optimized and efficient manner.
And just one more question specific to the GCC space. Mr. Pravesh Shukla, who's the Associate Director at HCL Tech, he asks, what are top 3 leadership roles that every GCC should have? And what are the top 2 initiatives every GCC should take?
Yeah, so I'll start with the second question first. I think one of the big trends that we're seeing, going into 2026, is that GCCs are going to become more and more value creators from an innovation and R&D point of view. There's a lot of traction in terms of how AI will be anchored to the GCC, and the reason for that is that the talent to build with and for AI is frankly going to come out of markets like India, right? So one of the initiatives I think that a lot of GCC should initiate is definitely some amount of a bottoms up sort of skilling of their employees on AI to reduce a little bit of that knowledge gap, because the big fear and concern that people have is that they're going to lose their jobs. In fact, we did a big survey recently. We had about 3,000 odd people who responded, and what we were trying to understand is how do professionals view AI, right? So on one side, people are saying it's an extremely urgent skill. It's going to impact my work in positive ways. I'm going to be more productive, etc. And on the other side, there was an overwhelming number of people who were worried that they're going to lose their jobs. And I think this gap between people who look at it as a force of good and people who sort of feel that they're left behind is going to continue to widen, and it's going to create a situation where organizations will deal with a huge change management challenge. So I think I would definitely encourage this sort of bottoms up initiative to skill and reskill and upskill and really encourage people to use AI a lot more. At the same time, I would also encourage them to do a top-down initiative to actually encourage their leadership to understand the value of AI and not just to go beyond the headlines and really understand how it's going to impact their teams and how to re-benchmark what productivity could look like. The other initiative I think for GCCs is also to really focus on this notion of retention. I think market's going to get competitive. More and more GCs are going to come in, and your best people are also going to be the best people for multiple other people who are coming in and looking to set up a center. So I think for a lot of GCCs today, retention will come from ensuring that they are clearly providing a growth path, and ensuring that they have sort of learning opportunities that I mentioned, are obviously competitive in terms of benefits and compensation, but are also building a culture of integration within the entire company. So it's not just GCC and HQ, but it's one company, right? In terms of top skills that I think GCCs will have, I definitely think there will be some leadership roles around AI globally sitting out of the GCC. A lot of our customers are already hiring head of AI roles, which I think is going to become more and more common. I also think that there will be an increasing number of roles around the data side of AI, right? So whether that's data engineering or even in terms of infosec and so on, I think that's going to become critical. And then finally, I think the other roles that will probably be hired at the GCC more in terms of just more native learning and development or sort of employee growth roles, where you're actually figuring out how do you get your workforce to be a lot more upskilled and ready, right? So I think that's what's going to happen.
Amazing. A lot of insight over there. Pravesh, for you to take away. Something you said at the outset, given that with AI, there's going to be a lot more value creation for expectations specifically from the GCCs over here. So I was having similar conversation with another GCC leader, and they were saying, essentially there'll be more and more R&D potentially moving in over here, or that's sort of already happening. And so will we now see over the next year and a half, the content communication being around white papers, patents? Is that the expectation in terms of value creation long term?
Yeah, it's already happening, and there's a lot of patents already being filed from GCCs in India. I think that's on its way. I think a lot of the conversation today is on how do you fast track some of the R&D and innovation for an organization by using the GCC more strategically. And quite frankly, I think the more you hear about companies doing it, the more it brings in some of that confidence for others to try it. So I think that is sort of like a self-fulfilling cycle, which will kick off once you start seeing some success stories. But quite frankly, if you look at, for example, Google's building DeepMind, a lot of their research is actually happening out of India already, right? So I think that's just an example of how some of these GCCs are already driving high-end research.
And the question at the outset was about GCC in a box, and this is something that Vikram posted about recently. I would invite you to also view that from just from a communication perspective, how he's captured a lot of really value-driven sort of communication in 2.5, 3 short minutes. Now, GCC in a box is an interesting idea, right? And I remember sometime back you were talking about the OS of global work, naming of Talent 500, Byond Travel, Byond Travel, one WRK, one work. So you've always had a thing for framing things that have a little bit of a sticky factor, right? So how do you think of simplifying an idea for large appeal in that context?
Yeah, I think it's so important to be memorable, particularly in the sort of attention deficit age that we live in. And shorter, simpler, sweeter. I think that for me is just the sort of formula that I follow. Right, it has to be something that is easy to associate with what idea you're trying to communicate. um, and I think there is a lot of complexity that people throw in with trying to brand or rebrand or come up with names, and I often find that the uniqueness of those names are only understood by a small group, right? And so that inside joke is now, or that inside sort of concept is now being shared with the world, and the expectation is that everybody's going to get it, and the reality is no. In fact, I don't know about you, but there's so often, like, I've used a product or a company and I've forgotten what the name is, and I've looked for everything else that sounds like it except the actual name.
Except the actual
And I
name,
have to
yeah.
go to some email and like, okay, like, yeah, I remember there was a forgot password. And then finally you're like, okay, just, you could have named it something that's a little bit more easier to use. So that's the approach that I take. Typically what I try and do is, I will find names in the industry that I like, that are sort of similar or have a nice ring to it, that I think kind of captures what I want, and sort of fit that shorter and simpler, description. And then I just work off that. And I find that sometimes that is the best way to do it. And of course, it's very hard now to get domains, especially .com is of course long gone, but now it's .io, or in fact now .ai as well. It's very hard to get domains that are full words, which is why the knockoff a vowel sometimes ends up working well. But yeah, that's the approach that I take.
A little, a couple of hacks there with naming. I also know, Vikram, that when you're in a meeting and then you're maybe listening to some stuff, and correct me if I'm wrong, depending on how interesting it is, accordingly the doodling on the notebook will
Yeah,
get more
gets better.
detailed, gets
Gets
better, huh?
better. Yeah,
Where did that start from?
that's I don't. I feel like I need to be always doing two things at one time if I'm going to really concentrate. And I don't know. That's just how my mind works, I think. And so if I want to listen, then I will draw it. It allows me to focus. Um, but yeah, that is true. But it gets misunderstood. A lot of times people have told me, well, I was in a meeting and you weren't paying attention. And for me, it's like I was actually paying more
More
attention
attention.
than I was if I was just sort of leaning back and looking at you. So yeah.
Oh, that's good to know. I had a similar insight with a colleague, I don't know, 15 years ago, and she said the exact same thing. If it's more detailed, I'm actually paying a lot more attention. It really
Yes.
works for my kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and you built so many different companies. You've done so many different things over time, both personally and professionally.
Yeah.
Uh, and I know that you have a great love for art, right?
Yes.
And artistic expression, whether it's through dance, theater, music, etc. I'd love to know, how does your love for art show up in how you deal with people?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest learnings with art or any sort of expressive medium is the fact that there is no one right way to interpret it. Everyone draws their own meaning from it, and everybody understands it differently. And I think what's important is, what does it mean to you, and how do you understand it? So one of the things that I've learned is that the same idea or concept, can be understood very differently from you, by you, or by me. And I think one of my biggest learnings is that I think as a leader, your job is really to ensure there is alignment. Like, it's just that word. You just have to make sure everybody's speaking and saying the same thing. And for me, just again, answering your question from two perspectives. One is, in my current role as, let's say, an entrepreneur or a founder, is that I have a vision. I need everybody to be aligned with the vision. They may not agree with it, and we can discuss and debate it, and then that vision might change. That's okay. But once it is set, then everybody's aligned. And I found that alignment is much harder than it appears. And so the learning that I have really is, how is somebody interpreting, this body of work, or this statement, or this vision, or whatever we're talking about, this conversation, right? And over time, I've learned the hard way that, document everything, simplify everything, really clarify what you want. Because if the expectation is that the other person is going to pick up and understand, then that's not going to happen. And I found so often that I will take that for granted, and then later realize that we were just talking about completely different things.
Different things.
But also, just in terms of, like, apart from just, from a leadership stand, just in terms of, everyday life or working with people, I think there's tremendous value sometimes in just being able to swap hats, even for that brief second, and just think about perspective, right? Why does this person feel so strongly about something, and why am I not able to understand that point of view, right? And I think if I'm able to make that separation between what I'm thinking versus what I think I'm thinking, in the sense that, what is the other person, like, you just got to sort of step out and be the observer, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really where magic happens. I think you can just drop all subjectivity, and from a position of just absolute neutrality, just observe and say, okay, I get it, right? Now I get why you're thinking about it this way. So I find that to be very helpful. I've been trying it recently, and I've been reading a lot about, negotiating, and how some of these, you read about how these FBI hostage negotiators use these sort of psychology tricks to negotiate. And a big part of that is just understanding perspective, right? It's not coming in rigid. So I've been trying that a little bit in negotiations, and I've been trying it with an audience that I think is the hardest to negotiate with, which is my kids. And so that's like my little testing ground to see, okay, if I have to negotiate with them, how do I frame this in a manner where, their perspective is met. And yeah, it's fascinating, right? We're learning every day. I haven't figured it out, but I'm learning every day.
That's amazing. I work with another leader, and he has christened himself. He's in his mid-60s. He's now a very successful MD of a big pharma company.
Yeah.
He's christened himself a consciousness gardener.
Wow.
Yeah. And his approach, very similar negotiation is, how can we ensure it's a win-win on both sides? Quite often you go this traditional mindset, MBA mindset is also, okay, one person has to win, the other has to lose.
Yes.
But yeah, and you mentioned a book which is around negotiation. Any recent inspirations from any podcasts or movies that you've got recently?
Yeah, so there's a book called Never Split the Difference, and it's by a guy called Chris Voss, and he used to be like this, FBI negotiator, or he's negotiated, or he stopped the FBI negotiation, one of those things. I found that book was very interesting, just kind of, depths of human psychology and how to use that in terms of negotiating. So that was interesting. There's a couple of different podcasts that I listen to, and which I find very interesting. The Knowledge Project from 𝘁𝗵𝗶𝘀 is interesting because he gets good guests. He's also written a book on mental models, which I've sort of really thinking about how do you fast track thinking, right? Which is applying the right mental model to it. And what else? Yeah, so I love some of Tim Ferriss's podcasts just because I think he's very good. He asks amazing questions, right? So of his podcast really go deep with subject matter experts, but in a very simple manner, which I really like. There's another guy called I listened to Amit Verma's Seen and the Unseen, which is a very interesting podcast where he talks about the second order effects of things, and he gets guests who talk about very random subjects sometimes, but they go into such depths of those subjects, talking about the unseen part of it, which I found very interesting. One of the most interesting ones was on the life of truckers in India. There was an author who had written a book, and how he sort of portrayed the entire ecosystem around trucking in India, which was very interesting, right? Fascinating. I would have never thought about that as a subject, but yeah. So those are some of the things that I've been listening to.
Amazing. And coming up to the last couple of questions over here, uh, I would now invite Vikram to put on his Oracle hat and tell me, what are you looking forward? Because I mean, we've talked about a bunch of different things, and I know that you love sort of keeping your finger on the pulse of what's happening now, but also what's sort of coming. And again, from a sort of creative lens, but also technology lens, what are you looking forward to in the world of AI, communication, design, creativity? Let's say just over the next 6 to 12 months, because beyond that, it's very hard to sort of predict.
Yeah, I mean, I think with AI, I consider myself a power user of AI. I use AI in almost everything that I do today at work, but also outside. And I've started to come to think of it as an assistant that knows everything and that can sort of do everything. But I think the misconception that people have is that a lot of people feel that it's going to suppress creativity or free thinking, or the fact that you know the it reduces the quality. I actually think the opposite. I think what it's going to do is, it's for those who know how to use it well, it's going to become 100x booster in how quickly and how well they work. And the ones that don't use it will get left behind very quickly. So what I'm really looking forward to is a really real sort of level up in terms of it becoming something that everybody's using it right now. How well you use it really comes down to the environment that you're provided. And in work, at least, I encourage my teams to use it without any fear or shame of the fact that they've used AI. But at the same time, my feedback to them is always that the output is only as good as the input. So you need to get better at prompting. And so I'm really looking forward to how creatively I can continue to use AI at work, and the impact that it's going to have on my business. But also in terms of course, the impact on the industry is going to be pretty severe in terms of AI completely changing how people work. And so I'm looking forward to, and we're working on some really cool ideas. So I'm looking forward to sort of being at the forefront of doing some of that work, hopefully. So yeah, that's what I'm looking for. But also, just on another front, completely, you spoke about creativity. Some of the content coming out with AI, especially around filmmaking, is phenomenal, right? And again, it goes back to the same point that I was making. I think the people who know how to use it well, who already have extremely creative views and a mindset to kind of build, will be off the charts in terms of what they can do with it.
Amazing. Um, Last question from Sandeep Kumar Akimola, who is your CISO at ANSR. He asks, Vikram, how do you stay motivated all the time?
Oh man, I don't. There are days that I wake up that I'm not motivated at all. But I do find that I think motivation is a function of the mind and mindset, and there are ways to to get yourself in a mindset that allows you to embrace as much of what your body can give you from a motivation standpoint. For me, that is working out. I have a workout routine that I fix first and every day. And for me, just working out and getting a little bit of that dopamine flowing through the body allows me to actually be in a space where I'm at least mentally a lot more charged up. And interestingly, I've noticed that correlation on the days that I'm not working out. You know, other day, not every day, but obviously, if I were to look at the days where my motivation levels are really low, it probably coincides with days that I've not been working out as well. So for me, it's a one-to-one for sure. But also apart from that, I think it's just about being excited about the work that you do. If it's not the work that you're doing today, then there has to be something that you're looking forward to that's coming up in the future, and really sort of building up towards that. One of the things that I do, this is also going back to the hack that you asked me earlier. This is a very real thing that I do, and my wife, she goes exactly the opposite way. So we have interesting arguments about this. But one of the things that I do is I start talking about things that I want to do before I've done them, as if I've already done them. And then it puts me in a position where I've now put that message out to the world, and I have no option but to actually do it. So I found this very helpful, like especially when you're, early days of a startup and you're building it, just talking about what you're going to be doing 3 months out, and talking about, the fact that it's here. And it does two things. One is it allows you to get feedback in real time. And two is it commits you to a plan that you have to follow through, because now you've got other stakeholders who are going to hold you to it.
Amazing. So, I mean, it's like visualization on steroids in some ways.
Yeah.
I think we're more or less done with time. Vinay has asked, what got you interested in Latin dancing?
It was it was partially an accident. My mother had signed up, and then she didn't want to do it, and she said, "Oh, now we've paid for the classes, so you better go, because I want to get my money's worth." So it started with that, but quite frankly, I was so bad at dancing that it was just I just wanted to get half decent at it. That was just what was sort of in my mind. And then in doing so, made some great friends. It's a very social activity, so it's a great way to meet great people, and then the community just sort of carries that passion forward. So I was very lucky to sort of see that. And then at some point, I think it became a very, very interesting extension of who I was, right? So rather than just being someone who had this sort of job or this kind of work, now I had another personality to myself, which was very exciting.
Amazing. And lastly, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
On LinkedIn. If you look for my name, or it's at Vikram Ahuja 1, I believe, or Vikram Ahuja 27 on Twitter or X.
Awesome. Thanks so much for this conversation, Vikram. It was really fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Karan. Good fun, and thank you for all the questions to everyone who shared.
Of course, yeah. And 50 minutes went by very quickly. This is something I should have actually mentioned at the outset. This is something we're working on the back of this conversation and other stuff, our learnings. We've actually put together GCC LinkedIn for Leaders playbook. If you're interested, drop me a comment or a DM. But thanks for joining us, folks, and follow Vikram and Karan on LinkedIn. Thanks again, Vikram. This is LinkedIn for Leaders. See everyone in the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.